This episode is brought to you by San Pellegrino Ciao, a new kind of flavored sparkling water. The kind made with real fruit juice, a pinch of Sicilian salt, and the sparkle of the Italian sun. With no added sugar and just 10 or less calories per can, enjoy. With love, from Italy. By San Pellegrino Ciao now.
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimp and Way.
Yes, MailChimp and Way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp?
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Justin Holmes, a professor of political science at the University of Northern Iowa. But I'm also joined today by a professor of political science, Mike Baranowski, who is joining us back on the show as our third head of this crazy trio this morning. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Morning.
Good to be here.
Well, I'll be honest, it's exciting to be doing a third-person show with all of you. And so, Mike, you just get to you get to be the voice of reason as Justin and
God. If I'm the voice of reason, we're in trouble, guys. Is all I got to say.
Well, that's your role. I'm sorry. That's just what it is. But now we did have some unique findings, over the last couple of weeks. We've got some additional supporters. And Mike, what we're trying to decide are these donations to bring you back or donations to keep you away? So who do we have to thank for this quandary?
Yeah, you know what I'd like to thank, but anyway, but yes, we do have some new supporters, and I do want to thank them very much. There's Avery and JTK, who are new Patreon supporters. Brandon, who was a former supporter, and he's once again took a break, a current supporter again, and Jody, who's a longtime listener and supporter, and who is now a supporter at our executive producer level. So thank you so much, all of you. And also, I forgot to mention, Gleb and Emily, our new trial supporters. So a lot of folks who either are desperate to have me back or are really happy that I haven't been on the show. I don't know what, but whatever the reason, thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. It's always a little humbling when I think of all the names and all the people who are providing funds for this to happen. And it makes me feel good in so many different ways. And so thank you all. So, well, let's get to the stuff that, you graciously donate us to get to. And where we thought we would start today was, well, the America Party, or whatever this might be. What's been going on? Well, I think it's a part of a larger story. This is something we've been talking about for a number of weeks here in the Politics Guys, and that has been Musk's general break in relationship with at least Trump in particular, and now seemingly the Republican Party. So really, is he really doing this? What's his goals? How might this work? Let's run through it a little bit. Earlier this week, Musk announced, and where else but on X, that he was officially forming the America Party to, quote, give you back your freedom, end quote. Which, that's not a bad little slogan. The big, beautiful bill is really just part of the, quote, uniparty, as Musk puts it. This followed him conducting a poll on X, one of his favorite ways to make decisions, over people wanting a party. He asking if, quote, a party that actually represents the 80% in the middle, end quote. About 1.2 million users said yes to that poll, and so he responded on X by saying, quote, by a factor of 2 to 1, you want a new political party, and you shall have it, end quote. I don't know the biblical overtones there with shall, I don't know. Now, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, remember, right now this is all talk, and I'm thinking a little bit, gentlemen. I don't know if you guys were Office fans, but I'm thinking a little bit of Michael Scott when he declared bankruptcy. I'm getting a few of those vibes here. I declare a political party. But be that as it may, because just on the technical side, let's get into the details here a little bit. Remember, for listeners. In the United States, as a result of the Constitution, each individual state manages its elections inside of some particular rules, but they have wide latitude for managing those elections and even wider latitude when it comes to managing ballot access. And different states have very different levels of complexity in that front. And for many states, as a matter of fact, the last time I've looked at the studies on this, about 40% of states have the biggest barriers purposefully on parties that have never existed before. And so they have kind of the most onerous ballot access. But like Ross Perot before him, money can cover a multitude of sins, gentlemen. And what we do know from both NPR and Axios is that Andrew Yang has said that he's been in touch with Elon and his team, saying, quote, "Look, anyone who wants to challenge the duopoly has a friend in me," end quote. Other third parties have come up to say, look, you should kind of like merge with us, including No Labels. The Libertarian Party has been urging him via X to not start a new party, but to join the Libertarian Party and kind of revamp it because they do have the most ballot box access of any other non-Republican or Democratic party. So while pundits are already kind of running polls about how this might impact the Republican Party, I would caution listeners, it won't. We have single... listen, that's not, I didn't think any of you guys were going to disagree. We have single member districts. Just moving on. Single member districts, first past the election. You've been on the show. You know this. It's not going to happen. Thanks for playing moving forward. But where it could have a little bit of an impact could be financially, right? So at the last dollar amount in the fall, Elon donated $288 million in the last cycle, making him far and away the largest donor. So, maybe money might make a little bit of difference, but it wouldn't make a difference in terms of this third party winning anything or doing it. Obviously, maybe not obviously, interestingly at least, Trump and others have weighed in on this, arguing that it's, quote, ridiculous, calling Musk himself a train wreck. His full comment was, quote, "I think it's ridiculous to start a third party. It's always been a two-party system, and I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. Third parties have never worked, so he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous," end quote. So, gentlemen, what's the reality here? What might be worth thinking about? Because it's not often, at least, that somebody with this deep of pocket says, hey, I want to do something, even if we don't think the precise thing being articulated is realistic. So, Justin, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think that, this is one of those things that Musk has a habit of overpromising and under-delivering, and this feels like one of those half-baked things that he'll talk about for a couple days and then just kind of drop. But, I agree with you, in terms of the difficulties of starting a third party. For that matter, we have lots of third parties, as you pointed out. I think in Iowa last election, I think I had 6 presidential candidates to choose from or something like that, 4 of whom you've never heard of and neither have I. So, it's within the realm of possibilities to start a party and get people on the ballot. I don't see a whole lot of impact of this, even if he goes through, which I'm skeptical that he will. It'll show up sometime around the same time as the Hyperloop, I think, is when this party might happen. But as you point out, there are structural problems, there are legal problems with doing this. The other thing that I'd maybe like to focus on is, who is really the constituency for this? Musk, views himself as this. I love that he thinks that 80% of Americans are, on his side of politics, whatever that is. I'm not seeing much of a constituency. Without knowing kind of what this platform, what this party would even stand for exactly, it's very hard to make the case. And I've seen a couple kind of analyses of voters, and there was a poll kind of after he announced this that was in the ballpark of like 40 or 50% of voters would be open to voting for the America Party. That's without knowing anything about it. And that's kind of consistent with the percentage of people that say, oh, there'd be a third party and I'd support it. The problem being it's, everybody's imagining this third party that is exactly like what they want. And that's not what they're going to get. And you can't build, part of it is it's this fractious, group of people. And I don't think, you can build up amongst the dissatisfied. You can't really unite them into one party very easily. They want really disparate things. G. Elliott Morris actually had an email he sent out this morning about this. And he did, it was fairly complicated. I have to admit, I was in a bit of a pre-caffeine fog, but basically using sort of national election study attitude stuff to sort of estimate, what percentage they might take. And he was down in the low single digits or like under 1% even, in terms of support. I do think the money is potentially more interesting, although frankly, Republican politics function fine without him spending on it. And so I'm not sure that, unless he takes up a bunch of money and starts, really lambasting Republican candidates, which he could, that could cause some problems with them. But I'm not sure that sort of withdrawing his financial support would make a whole lot of difference.
Mike, what do you think about this?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different position on this. And, Donald Trump, of course, Donald Trump, I don't say of course is right, but Donald Trump is right when he responded to that. I don't think the system's set up for more than two parties. And I certainly agree. And everyone thinks that there's just no way this is going to work. And I certainly am one of those people for all the reasons that you cited and Justin, you cited. But then I think back 20 years ago, no one would have thought that Tesla would be anything. And now I think its market cap is way more than the other big three combined, I believe. 6 years ago, when Starlink started, nobody thought that it was going to have the majority of all satellites around the world in space would be Starlink satellites, and pretty soon it's going to be close to 2/3. So I'm not saying this is going to work, but what I'm saying is that if you want to bet on someone to do a seemingly impossible thing, betting on the richest guy in the world who's done something like that already twice, albeit in different areas, that would be where I place my money. And so if anyone can do it, I think Elon Musk can do it. He's got the money, he's got the celebrity, and I can see it happening, especially how he envisions it. And I understand he wants to start small. He talks about being laser focused on 2 or 3 Senate seats, maybe 8 to 10 House districts in the midterms. That's where throwing a lot of money in certain races. I could see that, or even bringing in some already incumbent office holders. Like, for instance, let's say, Thomas Massie, no friend of Donald Trump, and it goes both ways. There's a good chance that Thomas Massie could be primaried. Well, get an incumbent and say, you're going to lose your seat. How about become an America Party person, and at least you have a chance. So I'm not saying it's going to work, but I'm saying that if anyone can do it, I think Elon Musk can, though I put the odds of it actually being a thing that's anything more than like a brief Reform Party thing we saw in the early 90s. It's maybe 15%.
Let me throw in a couple of thoughts on that, because actually I think that's a really interesting observation. One thing I think that's smart actually is starting smaller. So many third parties sort of swing for the fences and get a whole lot of nothing. And I've always said, if you wanted to build a party up, start with some city council seats and, some of those things that are more winnable. Maybe the Senate's a little bit of a moonshot, a Mars shot, if you will. But I think that's a wiser strategy. The other thought that I had, it's a system that does not play nice with third parties for all kinds of structural and legal reasons. On the other hand, we have seen moments where, a party fizzles out and gets replaced. And so
we call those party
again,
systems in history and political science. Those shifts either in the party structure, the bases, or the actual party themselves, as the Federalists die out, for example.
Exactly. So, I've been prophesizing for years, and it hasn't come to fruition yet, although maybe a little, that, just historically speaking, we're due for a realignment. We get them sort of every 40 years or so. And so, we're kind of overdue, I suppose. But there is this possibility here, again, the Democrats, I mean, if you look at sort of approval of the party, it is bad.
Dismal.
It really is.
Nobody, it's not the worst that I've seen. Republicans in Congress were polling at 12% at one point back in the mid 2000s, but it's bad. There's also the possibility, I mean, there's always been this question of, what's a post-Trump Republican Party look like? I don't necessarily see evidence of this. I mean, Republicans really seem to love him, but what if he finally does something that totally tarnishes the brand? You could, if you have one party collapse in some capacity, that does create a space. It's not a third party anymore; it's a new second party. Again, I think the likelihood of that is very small, and the likelihood of whatever Musk is selling being that is low. But it is maybe an alternate avenue, rather than being a third party that one party gets knocked off. It actually in Colorado back in the early 2000s, there was a three-way governor's race, and the Republican came in third, and the Colorado Republicans were actually, I believe, at legal jeopardy of losing their kind of official major party status. It didn't quite happen, but I guess there's a threshold for, kind of governor's race stuff. So it's certainly possible that, one of the other parties could just do something, to absolutely shoot themselves in both feet, I suppose. And, this third party could pop up and take one of their places, but I wouldn't put the odds of that super high.
That's fair, and I hear, Mike. I hear what you're saying there. The Elon Musk, the bet on 5 red, it just comes around more often. Something's wrong with the table in that sense. But I think the other thing that can be a little weird is Elon is he's an unusual person, and he always has been at best.
That's gentle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But throughout his life, he has also honed in on a few things that are true, right? And I do think I will give him some credit here, right? His idea that one of the primary issues in American politics is what he calls it, quote, deficit reduction and fiscal responsibility, end quote, as being kind of the central issue. I don't disagree with him on that. I think there's a lot of truth there, and I can understand. I don't understand how he ever thought he was going to get that out of a Trump party, but I do understand being disillusioned in the wake of the big beautiful bill. But yeah, no, I mean, and the realignment, that's all. I think you had kind of hinted at that in a bonus show a few weeks ago, Justin. But the other I mean, you're right there, and I've often thought about that in terms of, is the Republican Party, when we're teaching these classes in the future, will we mark the Republican Party as being fundamentally different in the post-Trump era because of its base, right? Like, in other words, is it itself is that the realignment? But
we don't know until it's retrospective, But I mean, there are signs. I mean, in terms of shifting constituencies a little bit, and maybe shifting Latino voters and that kind of education gap and things. But I don't know that any of that's as dramatic as what we've seen. But yeah, I do wonder.
Well, and the age. That's the other one you got to add in there. The age shift towards younger voters to Trump is a statistically significant. When I say big, I want listeners to be aware. There's kind of big, what you might think big, like 80% of people moving, or what we think about it as social science, meaning it's statistically significant.
It's definitely not zero. Yeah,
so, exactly.
Yeah, and I think to all of those, I think that's one of those things where you don't know if it's a blip or a trend or a permanent thing for a while. So we don't know if 24 is an outlier for various reasons, which has been kind of my thought, or if that's the start of a trend. But yeah, there is this question. I've had Republican students that have asked me, I think generally of the disillusioned with Trump, but kind of when he won, I remember some students asking, well, what's next for Republicans? And it could be that, he's transformational about what the whole party system looks like, or writing that. So
Yes, Mike, please.
I was going to say that, you mentioned the deficit reduction thing, and clearly it seems like this is driving Musk more than anything else that discussed with the bill. But it occurs to me that if you think you can build a third political party and make it a viable party on the primary issue of fiscal responsibility, I want whatever you're smoking, send it here, because that's just not. But the larger issue is a party has to be about something or other, and if it's just about the fiscal responsibility and anti-wokeness, I don't see him drawing enough people from either of the two major parties to make any more than a blip. So I think he'd have to tone that down if he's really serious about competing in a large number of elections.
I would just add that deficits are one of those things that everybody's against until you actually have to fix them. Well, but yeah, I mean, it's easy, but I mean, you can have, low taxes, high spending, or deficits, pick two, basically, or low deficit, sorry, but you're trading those things off, and when the rubber hits the road, we've seen in practice, you don't get a whole lot of, I mean, we're either raising taxes on people, which nobody wants, or you're cutting things that people like, which is really, the stuff around the edges, killing the NSF doesn't fix the budget. You're looking at major cuts to things that people like, and so. I think if you ever got past to an actual platform stage, I don't know that the specifics would be appealing to people either.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, but, since we're talking about kind of the Trump and this question of what is a post-Trump party looking like and what does the Republican Party look like, there is kind of this conspiracy, but I also think some real legs to it. Epstein story that I think we need to talk about. I think here might not be a bad place to do it. Now, look, we got to be very careful, and we've done this a number of times on the show where we're dealing with conspiracy issues, and not always just the underlying conspiracy issue, but the effects thereof, which is in fact important. And so right now, we've got Trump pal and conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer calling for Attorney General Bondi to resign. You have Musk publicly wondering how people can trust Trump if he won't release the files. And there's a lot going on here. So let's just start with, I think it has been so long that I'm not even sure everybody really understands Epstein outside of the conspiracy stuff. So just a quick recap on this before we get to what's happening this week. So Jeffrey Epstein is 6 years dead. Hard to believe that, but it is 6 years dead. Yeah, it feels like yesterday because of all this conspiracy stuff, right? Again, that's why I like starting with the empirics. But that has not stopped him from being an important cultural icon in certain circles. And, of course, as I've been alluding to here, the subject of conspiracy. So here it is. In 2005, Epstein was the subject of a Palm Beach, Florida investigation for paying underage girls for sex. 3 years later, in 2008, he pleads guilty to 2 state, i.e. Florida, charges dealing with solicitation and procurement of a minor, which gave him 18 months in jail. He served 15 of those months. He also signed a non-prosecution agreement with then Attorney General Alex Acosta, which protected him from federal charges. But in 2019, that non-prosecution agreement was found to be in violation of federal law. He was arrested later in 2019 on sex trafficking charges at the federal level with victims as young as 14. Potential co-conspirators included Ghislaine Maxwell. He is denied bail and was awaiting charges when he hanged himself. The New York City medical examiner ruled it as such, although, and this is the beginning of some of the conspiracy, his family had an independent investigation hired that said that the injuries were more consistent with a homicide. However, there has never been any evidence for that view other than from the family. Eventually, in 2021, Maxwell herself would be charged and is still today serving 20 years for federal crimes resulting from sex trafficking. Now, That's the facts of what of the Epstein case. What moves forward is it has become a centerpiece for certain conspiracies. Both the Department of Justice and the FBI, both under Trump first, then under Biden, found that there was no comprehensive blackmail list or client list, or what is oftentimes the client file that has been floating around this past week, most prominently at least. Now, where the conspiracy really begins is that because Epstein hobnobbed and had connections with many famous people, they must have been part of this pedophile ring, at the center of which is Epstein. Now, in the case of Prince Andrew, for example, there might actually have been some independent things going on, but overall, there is no indication, there's never been any evidence that Epstein was doing anything other than, well, I say anything other, but let's be clear, he was doing terrible, terrible evil here, but he was not part of a pedo ring. He was simply a pedophile himself, I think might be the best way of putting that. The conspiracy theory goes that he must have been providing them to other people, and that's how he got into other circles, which leads to all these speculations that Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and others must have been part of the pedophile ring. And this goes back, for listeners who follow the show for a long time, there is one major American conspiracy theory is that the people who kind of control the strings behind everything is they maintain and kind of have a cult of a pedophile, right? They have this pedophilic cult. And so this was behind the Pizzagate stories. This was early QAnon stuff. But really since 2010-ish, it oftentimes centers on Epstein. Now, how does this get to the news this week? What's going on? Well, Donald Trump has long been adjacent to and sometimes outright peddled promises to conspiracy leaned groups. And importantly for our conversation, his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, had said on television repeatedly and most explicitly on Fox News that she in fact had on her desk the missing client list, quote unquote, this the centerpiece for uncovering the worldwide pedophile ring. Now, that's despite the fact that her DOJ memo confirmed that there was no client list. Now, she eventually has come out this week and said there's no weird footage, there is no client list. She's not saying I'm wrong, but for all practical purposes, she is contradicting herself and saying that, quote, there has to be a sex party list was bogus. This led Trump, even at a meeting this past week with her, to say, are we still talking about this? Right. Which, again, is unique since he had continued to say that this was going to come out. Now, why talk about this conspiracy theory, right? Like, what, right? Here's where it becomes maybe the most important for our purposes. MAGA has gone absolutely insane that the client list is now being withheld, and Trump therefore must be being blackmailed or on the list. And that list of individuals includes people like Megyn Kelly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Laura Loomer, Musk, and just the list goes on. As a matter of fact, what's been weird for me this week, I actually follow like some actual human being MAGA people that I know, right? Not like the Loomer types, but real human beings. This is the first time that I can say universally of the people I follow to try to understand this, absolutely universally. I did a little unofficial study yesterday. Every single MAGA person that I know personally has said, this is the moment Trump has let me down. What do we do now? So, from our point of view, this seems like a big bunch of nothing, maybe gentlemen in some ways, but conspiracy theories are an American institution. They're important. They affect behavior. And right now, Trump has undoubtedly, and probably for the first time, really angered his base to the point that we have people like burning their MAGA gear and suggesting that others do it because he's part of the pedo ring. What are our thoughts about this, especially in the wake of the breakup with Musk? Mike, why don't we come to you first, since I started with Justin last time?
Sure. Well, I think this will blow over in a week or two. And sure, there are always going to be some fringe nuts who are going to be crazed about, or people like Tucker Carlson who believes whatever he thinks is going to get him the best ratings, as far as I can tell. And so this is, in the history of nothing burgers, I don't know, this is like a double nothing burger with cheese or something. It's I guess the only thing I can take away from this is the conspiracy theory folks who are now in the Trump administration previously were peddling this kind of stuff, kind of hoisted by their own petard. And so what are they going to do? What are they going to say? They knew it was BS when they were saying in the first place. They just said it to please the kooks, and now they're stuck. And so boo-hoo, I mean, look, Pam Bondi, right, particularly, why, I guess I have trouble understanding why anyone would believe Pam Bondi in the first place. And this is not an anti-Trump attorney general kind of claim. I could see how you would believe a Jeff Sessions or a Bill Barr, but Bondi, this is the woman who said, just to remind you guys, she claimed that the 21 million fentanyl pills that have been seized since Trump took office, that means 21 million lives saved. And then she doubles down that a few days later, says, no, actually, Caesars have saved 119 million lives. And then she doubles down again in the cabinet meeting and says, you know what? Actually, it saved 258 million American lives. And then later, some spokesperson freaked out and said, well, that just meant it was the equivalent of 258 million lethal doses of fentanyl that have been seized. Come on, this person has no credibility. This is what happens when you put hacks, when you put pundits in important, responsible positions, which Trump didn't do in his first administration for the most part, at least early on, and is doing now. And so now these people, of course, they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Justin?
Oh my. So, I will say, in terms of the underlying here, I'm not entirely dismissive that there's not something, back there. I mean, it's not like Maxwell didn't go to jail for nothing, as far as that goes. I've always been kind of skeptical. I mean, the way they talk about so much of this, there's this idea that he's running a blackmail ring for Mossad and, things like that. And oh my God, there's tapes. And I hope to heavens there's not, for so many reasons. But it does have that feel. It's kind of, I mean, nobody could ever say what's in these files or what's on the list or what the list means or, any of those things. If you're doing quality criminal conspiracy, for gosh sakes, don't write stuff down. If I learned anything from The Wire, you don't take notes. And so, to me, this feels a lot like Hunter Biden's laptop, where it just sort of becomes this sort of totem upon which you can project whatever sorts of conspiracy stuff you want. And again, I mean, Hunter Biden's not a great guy either, by any stretch of the imagination. But it's sort of this notion of, oh, there must be a cover up, there must be this, must be that. Clearly, there's all kinds of things, and the things that are in there get wilder, by the minute in terms of imagination. In terms by dismissing this, we're all now part of the conspiracy as well. You realize, so we're part of the cover up, and I've been taking those sweet Epstein dollars to say this, but it doesn't help. His origin story is so weird. Also, I mean, just kind of he kind of comes out of nowhere and is managing money for Les Wexner, and it's just the whole thing is very weird, and there's a lot that is not kind of known, and so I think it's the kind of thing where he's a strange guy who clearly did some bad things, and then speculation becomes rampant. I'm inclined to agree with Mike. I mean, I think apart from the fringes, this is a story that goes away pretty fast. It's part of Musk's thing. I mean, his favorite insult is to call people a pedophile. This goes back to, kind of the Thai cave rescue diver guy. So, to seize on that with Trump doesn't entirely surprise me as a thing. It's become kind of a favorite right wing insult in general. It feels like. But I don't know. What would be interesting actually is what does this do with Loomer of all people? We spend a lot of time on Musk, and that relationship seems to be kind of over. But there's a lot of suggestion that Loomer has kind of a disproportionate amount of Trump's ear, and especially there have been a few people where allegedly she's sort of been behind them being out. So for her to kind of be down on Pam Bondi, that's an interesting observation. Does this drive a wedge between Trump and Loomer finally, or does this mark the beginning of the end for Bondi? I don't know. But certainly there is some discord there. I think mostly this will just play out on the fringes of X as a practical matter in a week or two, though.
Amazon One Medical presents Painful Thoughts.
I've been on hold to make a doctor's appointment for 23 minutes now. The automated voice has told me 47 times that my call is very important to them. I'm starting to think that they don't think my call is important at all.
With Amazon One Medical 24/7 virtual care, you'll get help fast without having to remain on the line to make an appointment. Amazon One Medical. Healthcare just got less painful.
What if Black Friday deals were available in the summer? Don't miss week-long doorbusters at Best Buy during Black Friday in July. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
Well, one thing really quick, I can't believe I'm saying this, in Bondi's defense, my gosh, but I will say that, I know.
Maybe it's this is Jay just dressed up as Mike, and it's like a voice
What happened in those couple weeks off?
I cannot speak of it. But anyway, so if you actually read through or look through what she said to Fox News, when she was asked specifically about the client list, she didn't respond specifically that the client list was on her desk. She just said that stuff as a reference to sort of, well, I'm looking at this right now, because of course there were like over 300 gigabytes of files. It's not like there was this 8-foot tall stack of stuff on her desk, but I think it's reasonable that she was in that position where she couldn't give the answer to the Fox News host that they wanted, and so she gave as close as she could. So she wasn't technically lying, she was bullshitting, which maybe you could actually argue is worse. So maybe it's actually not in defense of Bondi, and it makes her out even worse. I don't know. I'm feeling very schizophrenic all of a sudden.
Yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. I think the one thing that it can be hard, and that's why I was trying to look at some of the data. The Epstein, the feelings of the issue of Epstein are actually a pretty well polling issue, and so I think sometimes one of the things that can be difficult when we're analyzing things from a kind of a scientific perspective is we want to discount the variables that, while the variable itself has an impact, its underlying content is vapid. And I think this is one of those, right? So obvious, as you were teasing about a second ago, Justin, I don't think that we've got some giant widespread worldwide pedophile ring going on that Epstein is the center of. But at the same time, if that has enough traction to pull as an important issue, and if it's one of a primary reasons that people support or don't support a particular party or candidate, it can have real world impacts. And this does poll really high, again, higher than that I would like it to, right? Which is also can be frustrating sometimes. So, will the particular controversy here, like anything we know as a media effect, the media is a searchlight that is constantly moving about, bringing one episode into vision and another into darkness. So to that extent, I agree with you, but I'm not sure that over the long haul, this doesn't potentially have negative impacts, not just on Bondi, as you're suggesting to here, Justin, but also potentially downstream. Now, of course, Trump's not running for re-election, so that raises other, what does that matter?
Right.
Then?
I guess there's that was kind of my thought about this, is that this, I mean, he campaigned on releasing the list.
Right, exactly.
I mean, so, it's another one of those unfulfilled promises. And it is, I mean, there is this kind of bipartisan component to it. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people on the left upset about this too. It's not just people on, because, the rumors
it polls better than I think most people think. They think of just a few tinfoil hat guys on the right, but it's not.
Well, and what I keep seeing is, for gosh sakes, like, like, just lock up Bill Clinton. We don't care. It's been kind of the tenor of those. But I think, I mean, in terms of consequence, I mean, if there were blowback, Trump doesn't have another election coming up, and it is, I mean, there is this bipartisan thing. I mean, if we're just, again, not, I don't know that there's a list. I don't know who would be on it. Clearly, there are people that participated in some of this, I mean, it's not like people weren't convicted of trafficking young women, underage women,
girls, I think is the unfortunate word that we're looking for.
Yeah, well, it's that, but clearly probably, illegal. But it's also, I think, in terms of political blowback, I mean, part of where this may be, it may feed into sort of cynicism, but it is sort of, kind of bipartisan accusations. I mean, if we think about, again, I'm hesitant to even name names because I can't afford a libel suit right now. But,
just right now, I mean, but later in the year. No, sorry.
Later after some good things come in for me. But it is bipartisan. I mean, it is Clinton. Gates is a name that's tossed around a lot. Who, I mean, he's not really partisan, but Republicans seem to think he's a Democrat and whatnot. And so, I'm not sure that there could be direct Trump blowback. Although, frankly, not fulfilling his promises or going back on his word doesn't seem to really do much to him.
That's fair.
He's pretty Teflon that way. But because it is sort of the names that are out there are a bipartisan list, I don't know, even if this kind of stays in the spotlight, I don't know that it necessarily favors one party or the other.
I hear that.
It's more that sense of, hey, they're all bad, which I think, that's a problem in itself because there's this deep-seated cynicism out there. But yeah.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I think we should probably leave Epstein alone for now. And
time to get off the island.
Trey.
I didn't say it.
I was worried that we'd go an entire episode without talking about tariffs. So, but you're gonna. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna change completely and pivot to the court. And this harkens back to what we had talked about. Justin, you and I were the ones who got to talk about this. But yesterday on Thursday, a federal judge once again barred the Trump administration from denying citizenship to babies born in the United States. Now, as we had discussed, one of the things that was up, so what had happened, and Ken brought this up before, the Supreme Court earlier has banned, they have struck down as unconstitutional nationwide injunctions. But what has been left open is this question of the constitutionality of class action lawsuits brought as a way to potentially, at least not in all circumstances, but in some circumstances, circumvent that Supreme Court case. And again, that's something that Justin, you and I had talked early in the year, Ken had talked about. Now, the judge, originally appointed by President Bush, argued that the plaintiffs, those suing that is, could be provisionally proceed as a class. Now, meanwhile, just hours afterwards, the White House argued that the ruling was, quote, an obvious and unlawful attempt to circumvent the Supreme Court's order against universal relief. The judge decisions disregards the rule of law by abusing class action certification procedures, end quote. They go on to say that, quote, the Trump administration will be fighting vigorously against the attempts of those rogue district court judges to impede the policies of President Trump was elected to implement, end quote. Now, I mean, there's a couple of things we can talk about here. Once again, it struck me how I didn't blink the way that I used to here at the language being used, right? If you lose, it's a rogue judge, it's unlawful, right? I've become desensitized to that. I kind of last night I was thinking about that. We maybe talk about that a little bit, but the broader question here does become, and again, we talked about this. We don't need to spend too much time, but Justice Amy Barrett in the majority opinion seemed to be relatively open, a little more lax to the thought that class action lawsuits could come forward. But then we had the more narrow language of the Justice Alito concurrence. And are the justices, Justin, you and I had talked about this. Is the law the primary consideration here, or is this one of those kind of Marbury versus Madison circumstances where the court is also trying to thread a political needle in the hopes that they won't get overturned by the president? So Justin, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts? What do you think happens next, I guess?
Prognostication. So, just to go back, in case you haven't been hanging on my every word, I thought the previous decision was wrong too. Yeah, I think this is a case where the injunction should have held. I'm inclined to think that, again, this is as a class. I mean, for gosh sakes, of course they're a class. Like, I don't, it's you have a bunch of people under similar circumstances, facing potential great harm here. And again, I think that was my sense, just again, to go back to where we were a couple of weeks ago, in terms of the injunction, if ever there was a moment for injunction stripping people of their citizenship, that's something we need to kind of pump the brakes on until we've kind of reached an actual decision. This idea that, you can just pursue this policy, until we decide on this 2 years down the road, I think is highly problematic. In terms of where this goes now, I don't know, reading the tea leaves on the court, it seems like in a lot of ways they should have just been able to rule on the EO in the first place and saved us sort of all this procedural stuff. I mean, it's a short executive order. We know exactly what it's trying to do. We know where it sits in regards to, precedent. It seems like they could, I feel like we're spending a lot of time on this procedural stuff that might be important in some ways. I mean, I allowed, last time that, gosh, it would make some sense. I mean, there are real issues about, nationwide injunctions. And it's interesting to see how the parties have traded places on that over the last year. But gosh, they weren't a problem when it was Joe Biden, nor did he get relief from the courts, I might add. So I do think that, to some extent, what really drives me nuts about this is that we're spending all of this time on procedural stuff that might be things that need to be resolved, but in this case, this feels like not the moment to be doing it. I mean, there is a major substantive issue here that I'm not sure this is the time for these other things. In terms of the class, I mean, yeah, it's probably a stronger argument. And that gets into, again, the court has been kind of opaque on a lot of these rulings. You get more out of the dissents in many cases than you're getting out of the majority. And I don't know, where they're at. Is this truly, and this gets to some of my skepticism that I've shared before about, are the courts at this point about law and the Constitution, or are they more of a policy branch? And I'm really moving towards the latter in my perceptions in a lot of ways, not for the good, I might add. But I think there becomes this question, okay, so we've come back to class action status. Right, Alito's skeptical. I think, some of the judges are skeptical, justices are skeptical of class actions in general. This has sort of been a conservative thing for a long time that just in general making it harder to do class action stuff is kind of a goal. But I do wonder, yeah, it's a 6-3 ruling before. Do you peel off a couple over the procedure? Is it that this is, there were a couple justices that were upset about the procedure, but if you do it the right way, then they'll entertain it. Or is this, just a bunch of tap dancing around? Hey, they want to undo Wong Kim Ark, and they're just kind of slow walking us into that, which I think would give you two different answers. In terms of the procedural answers, the procedural rulings that might come up on this down the road.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
Don't have any. No, the ruling just came out yesterday. I haven't had a chance to read the judge's ruling.
No.
And when it comes to legal stuff, my position is I don't like to opine without having a chance to really thoroughly consider the judge's ruling. So
no, that's absolutely fair. I didn't even know what you'd add, but I don't know why. I wasn't ready for that. It was just I loved it. I loved everything about that. Well, gentlemen, I think probably we ought to stop there.
Oh, come on. No, we're only at like 48 minutes. We can go a little longer.
You think
we got to talk about tariffs. I said we were going to talk about tariffs.
Okay.
Before.
There we go.
Man.
There we go. Mike has put us in. You're going to get more right here then. Okay, tariffs. We've got time.
In one more instance of who are you and what have you done with Mike? You're the one that's always pushing me to be shorter.
That is fair. But here we go. This is gonna be. We're in soccer bonus time right now. This is overtime.
Let's speed run the tariffs.
Yeah, we're gonna speed through the tariffs. Okay, so what has been happening this past week? Trump promised 90 deals in 90 days. But what's actually happened? Well, Monday, Trump waded back into tariffs, renewing his threat to hit partners with tariffs. Now, originally, that was supposed to go into effect on Wednesday. That was the whole 90 days. It was a 90-day pause. But in an executive order, he pushed that 90-day pause back to August 1, offering another 3 weeks to certain countries. He also sent out a flurry of 14 letters to various countries, including Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and others. Now, the letters were nearly identical, except that they ranged in their rates from 25% to 40%. And it's also a little bit confusing because some of them are different than the original rates set back in April before the 90-day pause. So there's some moving parts here that can be a little bit complicated. Now, Trump stated on Truth Social that August 1 is now a definitive deadline. Quote, no extensions will be granted, end quote. As he would go on to say, quote, if you want to play ball, you have to. That is what you have to pay, end quote, he said during a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He would go on to say, quote, as far as I'm concerned, we're done. We're sending out letters to various countries telling them how much tariffs they have to pay, end quote. Now, the outlier, and maybe something we want to zero in on a little bit here, is the letter and the relationship with Brazil, where Trump in that letter has firmly backed former President Bolsonaro, who is currently on trial over an alleged coup attempt against the sitting government. Now, here, Trump has taken aim at the trial, and as the Wall Street Journal put it, it was the only letter that dealt with the support of a political ally. In fact, the former president told the Wall Street Journal last year that he was hoping Trump would use economic sanctions against the Da Silva government to help him to return to power in Brazil. Additionally, the White House has announced independently a 50% tariff on copper and a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals. Quietly, the Senate has a slight bipartisan pushback, while Senator Chuck Grassley and Maria Cantwell both have bills, respectively Republicans and Democrats, circulating that would expire tariffs created by presidential unilateral power after 60 days, unless approved by Congress. But in all honesty, at this juncture, there doesn't seem to quite be enough support for something like that. So, Mike, you wanted us in bonus time. So, sir, what are your thoughts on the tariffs?
Like I said, now we weren't actually in bonus time, so I just want to be I want to be clear. I think the problem, folks, that we like to talk a little bit before we start, and we actually talked about releasing some of this as sort of politics guys extra, but I think Trey was thinking back to our chatting beforehand, and so we're squarely under an hour at this point. So I just want to give the listeners, what they've come to expect. But anyway,
that's fair.
Because apparently I am the only one who speaks for the people out there. You guys, I don't know, you're kind of elites. I don't know what you're doing there. But anyway.
I'm just talking to myself.
But, it seems, on the tariff, seriously, it seems to me this is classic Trump. I mean, art of the deal type Trump, right? You make a big demand right before a deadline to give the other side not a lot of time. And if they maybe think they've been negotiating and getting somewhere with you, that's when you drop the bomb right when you think, okay, I almost got to deal with this guy. Boom. I mean, that's been Trump for what, like 40, 50 plus years, essentially, at this point. And it seems to have worked well for him, I guess, personally. But I think the problem is, even if it might work for a privately held business, when this sort of deal making, if you will, creates so much uncertainty in markets, there is a lot more risk than whatever would happen to the Trump organization or anything like that. So it doesn't surprise me. It's what Donald Trump does, and he's just doing it again. And I guess the other thing I'd say is just one theory might be that he really wants to get these deals signed before the appeals court and eventually the Supreme Court strikes down most of his tariffs, which I think is very likely to happen. And so, but if he can get those deals nailed down, then that doesn't matter. He's got those deals in. So I think this is not surprising at all to me. And why not threaten 500% tariffs on Brazil unless they, I don't know, install roundabouts on Fifth and Chesapeake or something like whatever. It's just Trump, being Trump.
I like we got to Chesapeake. But Justin, thoughts on the tariffs?
I'm laughing at the roundabouts thing because that was a huge political controversy here a couple of years ago. There was a guy that stood up in a city council meeting and said that roundabouts are products of Satan and communists. So I didn't know you could have that.
Is it because it's a circle? Is that the reason why?
I don't know. But anyway, to the tariffs, you
got to have straight lines if you're a conservative. We don't have circles.
I guess.
I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm just teasing.
I had a T-shirt with the quote on it. I'm not sure where it went, but anyway, I think part of this could be strategic. As Mike's saying, I'm more inclined to read this as this whole tariff policy has just been completely muddled. The way it's talked about, what it's for, how it works. And it's different people in the administration are saying different things. They're permanent. It's a negotiation towards something else. It's a revenue source, et cetera. And it's just also so muddled. I don't know exactly what he wants, except in the case of Brazil, which is somewhat abhorrent. I mean, you should just, send in the CIA like we used to do and overthrow them on behalf of a fruit company.
You all are trying to kill me today. That's what it is. This is what... Okay.
Heavy sarcasm, just to be clear. I'm not sticking up for United Fruit. But I don't know how you even negotiate with him at this point. He's trying to drive a hard deal, but I don't know what he wants. This Canada thing, they had just sort of punted on, they had this digital service tax that was supposed to be kind of a sticking point for Trump. They said, fine, we won't do the digital services tax, at which point he slaps a tariff on him. I don't know how you're supposed to negotiate with that. I don't know what it is that he wants. I don't know how it is that you appease him. At some point, I mean, it's tough because we're a big market, but at some point, people are just not going to want to play ball anymore. There is the rest of the world. At some point, I don't know, our country is really even going to be interested in having these negotiations. I'm not sure. I mean, you could just sit out and wait for somebody else on some level. I do think, I mean, I appreciate that there are some signs of life in the Senate. This was something we talked about a couple of weeks ago, but more in regards to the War Powers Act, but just that, the Congress has really divested so much power to the executive at this point. And I'm not just talking Trump here, but for gosh sakes, they should be clawing some of this back. Tariffs are supposed to be ratified and such. So on the other hand, that 60-day thing, I feel like, given Trump's pattern, Congress could say no and he just slaps a different tariff on him. I feel like it might be
again, let's be honest, he has yet to this point enforce, I don't think it's good law, but he still hasn't enforced the TikTok ban because he just hasn't wanted to enforce the TikTok ban.
I know, I'm so torn on that one. It's like, this is terrible policy. Why won't you enforce it? But I do. I think this is sort of symptomatic of a lot of those other things. But it is, I guess, to my mind, I mean, this whole episode with tariffs is kind of a great example of why I don't like kind of this unitary executive stuff. You are just there's a reason. There's a reason for Federalist 51. There's a reason that we divide out the powers, and it's so that you don't have the whims of one guy making policy. And I think this tariff stuff is really a great illustration of that. I mean, it just feels like Trump wakes up on a Tuesday and says, gosh, I think I'm going to tariff Canada today. And then we all have to go along with it.
But I think most of it's going to go away. I mean, if you take a look at it, like the whole justification for this, even in this last EO that he put out, this was about the, I think the Brazil or the Canada ones, I forget, they're all blurring together, but the authority is all about the unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and economy of the United States. That is the basis of the statutory authority, that international economic emergency, something
right.
Protection. Yeah, okay, and if these deficits are so persistent, I don't know how can they be unusual, because the last year we had a trade surplus, 1973, over half a century ago. So that's not unusual, right? And extraordinary. Well, right now the trade deficit is currently just a little bit over 3% of GDP. That's what the trade deficit has averaged for around the last 20 years. So these are neither unusual nor extraordinary. The Brazil thing is just completely way out there, right? So, and not only that, but the Court of International Trade already ruled that most of these tariffs were beyond his authority. It's scheduled for a hearing at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit on the 31st, so the day before these things would take effect. It's under expedited consideration. Most people think there'll be a decision by early to mid-August. And oh, by the way, the case is being heard en banc, which means all the active judges on this Court of Appeals. There are 11 of them. 8 were appointed by Democratic presidents, 5 Obama, 2 Biden, 1 Clinton, and 3 by Republicans. I know how this is going to go in the appeals court, and I know how this is going to go in the Supreme Court, because they just established this new major questions doctrine, and they're going to look at this, and if they, at least the majority of them are going to say, well, by the way, this IEPA doesn't even use the word tariffs. You can't do this. This clearly has major economic impact. Sorry, but no. Just about all of this is going to go away. And that's why the Senate isn't acting, because they expect that the Supreme Court eventually will bail them out, and it will.
Well, the other evidence you have in favor of your argument is take a look at the different market reactions earlier in the year to right now. I think earlier in the year there was the concern that it would in fact be serious, happen, and go into effect before there would be the ability of those things to go over, and we see the market contract significantly. In this instance, we are now on the 5th day of some record highs for this particular year, which means that the market is reacting on aggregate very differently this go round. Because if these were to go into effect, it's easy to model their economic effects. And so what that means, again, in the aggregate, we would assume that there'd be if anybody thought this was going to happen, there would be at least a minor market reaction to it. And the fact that there isn't is very strong evidence that some of the smartest people in the world are going, you know what? Exactly what you're saying, Mike. I'm gonna buy. I'm not gonna hedge, and we don't see any of those kind of margins changing either. We don't see people doing different kinds. You can security trade in ways where you're gonna hedge that the market's gonna decrease or increase, etc. And we don't see an increase in those kinds of calls either. And so again, I agree with you. I think we have some pretty good independent data that this is a game. I think primarily is Donald Trump and his administration waffles between the tomorrow we're going to have everything produced in the United States and, oh, wait a second, it's not actually feasibly possible to have everything produced in the United States. What do we do? And I think it's just a schizophrenic. I think you put it well, Justin. I don't think it's quite that dramatic, but I do think it's on those lines. Like, well, today I've woken up and I'm most concerned that not everything's produced in the United States. And then tomorrow I think, I guess an iPhone can't be produced in the United States tomorrow, but maybe I should pause this 90 days, right? That's what this feels like.
But I can still use it to make up the budget deficit by, a large tax increase on consumers. So
wow, yeah. Gentlemen, any last thoughts on tariffs?
I've said my piece.
Yep.
Okay. Well, then in that case, we really will be bringing the show to the conclusion at this moment. But that doesn't mean we're done. What we always do is we record a supporters exclusive midweek show, and I'd love for you to be a part of that as well. And so I know Justin and myself, and maybe even Mike, we'll find out, is going to be a part of that show. We're going to get into some things we didn't get a chance to cover, including the workforce reduction, the Supreme Court unsigned order. We're going to talk about some clean energy issues that have come up and more. But to get those, you've got to be a supporter. It doesn't take long to do. Remember, just look down there at the show notes and you're going to find links. You can get us on Patreon. You can get us on our website. If you'd like to do it in your browser, head to politicsguys.com/support. Again, that's politicsguys.com/support. You can also always email us at mail@politicsguys.com. I know what it's like. For some of you, becoming a supporter might be a difficult place to be in. If you'd still like to have the opportunity to get that show, please reach out to us at mail@politicsguys.com so that we can take a look and get that set up. It is also incredibly helpful and important if you will continue to subscribe, rate, and review the show. AI algorithms are more important than ever, and we need that. It's also huge if you can share this episode in your own personal social category. That's always a big win, and I thank you in advance for doing that. And then, as always, I'll close the show with a shout out to our executive producers. We talked to our newest supporters at the beginning of the show with Mike, but it is amazing to me the individuals who are part of our executive producers and what they do and how long some of you have done that. I can't tell you how important that is to me. And so I want to say a deep thank you to Wilma Marino, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, and Brian Matza. And Matt, and don't we have one more now as well?
Oh, you mean our newest supporter who became an executive producer? Yes, we do, in fact. And oh my gosh, who is it? I have to pull up my notes here, but thank you as well to Jody.
Jody, thank you so much. We'll see all of you again next week.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,